Salam and welcome back to Somali Dispatch, and on our weekly program Dispatches, I'm Abdul Qadir Goulet. This week we'll be discussing the latest in Somalia's election, including the fourth election completion failure, the US banning visas to Somali leaders who impeded democracy in Somalia, and Al-Shabaab resurgence in Mogadishu. To discuss these, we'll be joined by Hodan Ali, a nurse practitioner and a BRA Humanitarian and a Durable Solutions Advisor, and Quays, an astute Somali and East African political analyst. We'll begin by asking Hodan Ali to give us an update on Somalia's severe drought.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Abdul. Thanks for having me on again on Somali Dispatch. Yes, the first issue I think we really need to address is the drought that's going on in Somalia and the Horn of Africa overall. As you know, there's about 4.5 million Somalis that are facing acute food and water shortages. We've had rain failures for the past several seasons, and of course we've had ongoing climate-related challenges in the region that continues unabated. And unfortunately, now it's culminating to really a massive drought that, if things don't change in the next month or so, could really end up in acute famine that we've seen in 2011, actually much worse than what we've seen in 2011. So it's really important that Somalis across the globe and at home understand how dire the situation is. There's about 50% of Somali children are malnutritioned at this point. So you can imagine what will happen if interventions don't happen in time. In 2011, over 250,000 Somali children died because of the famine. So this time it probably likely will be worse because, as you can imagine, the resilience of communities has really plummeted over the decades since the last drought. So I appeal to everyone to really dig deep and make sure that you're sharing the wealth, inshallah, and obviously you never get poor with giving and giving sadaqah. So please make sure that everybody translates this message into actual action on the ground before it's too late. And thank you again for giving me the opportunity.
Not a problem. Hodan, as we know, in Horn of Africa and specifically in Somalia, politics has to do a lot with the lack of mitigating and effective measures in curbing this looming disaster. If you can give us your reaction to Somali leaders yet again missing another deadline in election conclusion, and your reaction to that.
Absolutely. I think politics is everything, and politics is local, especially to problems like drought and insecurity and everything else. We have now passed the deadline of February 25th that was set months back. Only about 60% of parliamentary seats have been held, and again, what does this mean, moving forward? There's another deadline that has been sort of set, which is March 15th. Likely this will materialize to probably a completion, but there are some contentious issues still outstanding, like the Garbahare issue. But, again, it's a failure of leadership. It's a failure of a system that has been really struggling, to be honest, with the Somali people for the last 5 years. And it's just sort of a result and a byproduct of what's been happening in the last 5 years. But it has real consequences in both, human lives in terms of the drought, but also in security terms. We're seeing Shabaab gaining, a lot of ground. And now they're actually launching full assault in Mogadishu almost weekly. So again, it really underscores, and again, international community has responded with the US now implementing the sanctions.
Right. We will get to those points quickly, and just wanted to give Quays Ibry welcome, and if you can please give us your take on the lack of election conclusion and why you think that is.
First of all, I want to support the message that Hodan is sending out to Somali community wherever they are, in order to help their brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers throughout the Somalia. And it's really difficult time, and especially when there is no good leadership that can stand out for the Somali community, that can help. this is very good time that Somali community to step up and really dig in their pocket to give something out to the Somali community, Somali people that are suffering in the droughts. Now, having said that, it's worth mentioning Gedo, which is the area that Hodan kindly mentioned just now, is one of the areas that are suffering quite badly in Somalia. And again, the Somali president is one of the key areas that he is using to kind of blackmail the whole Somali election. So the whole Somali election is not going anywhere. It's a lack of a leadership. We very clearly understood the role of the Somali prime minister when this president was a prime minister a number of years ago, and he couldn't hold the election. So the evidence is there. We are not expecting him to do another election at this point. All he's doing is objection after objection. He's not willing to let go. It's a daylight robbery for bringing a lot of soldiers into the parliament, spending money. So Somali community, Somali politicians have two choices. He's not giving the third option. You have two choices. One is let me stay in power illegally, and I'm staying as long as possible. The second option is let me steal as much as possible all the seats that I can steal, whether I pay, a lot of bribery related expenses, or whether I use some kind of force. So it's very, very, worrying time is ahead. And now yet another deadline is being missed. We have another 18 days to be extended. The international community is worrying about it. But right now, the Somali people need to wake up and realize this president is not someone who is going to give up and going to allow a fair election to happen. If we all recall, 18th of May, he came to the parliament and said, I'm now stepping aside. The whole security of the election and the election in itself will be handed to the prime minister. Now we understood every single signs that we see, whether it's Prawe that he taken soldiers into, and now whether it's Beledweyne, that we know a lot of people have died because of the explosions, and we know the army that has gone into there, or whether it is Galmudug, or whether it is Garbahari that he's holding 16 seats. So he's holding into the security of the election, which he, in front of the parliament, in front of every Somali individual was watching, said, I have handed to the prime minister. So cannot be trusted. This election is going to be, also the legitimacy of this election is another question.
Right.
I'll stop into that.
Right. Much has also been said about the NCC, Somali National, the Council, Consultative Council, having a role in how the election process unveils. And the US has, this last week, doubled down on their reiteration of their disappointment and the lack of completion of the elections, with the threat and the implementation of banning visas to Somali leaders who impede democracy in Somalia. Hodan, is the president the sole, should be the sole focus on these shortcomings, or is there a broader lack of leadership in completion of a credible process here?
Well, I think that the buck stops with the president, right? So he's the elected leader until he hands over the reign, and all the other subjects that he has put in place, and I will call them subjects because in essence, 3 of the 5 states are, on the behest of Villa Somalia. Is it a failed leadership across the board? Absolutely. But I think the buck stops with Farmajo at the end of the day, where Somalia is today, full accountability at Villa Somalia. But having said that, I think there must be accountability at the federal member state levels, those presidents who have done everything that they can to, sort of make this process as ugly and as tainted as possible for their own gains. Also need to be held accountable across the board. I think the prime minister also, as much as we have been, sort of supporting his efforts has had gaps. He's single-handedly transferred his authority to the federal member state leadership, which was a huge failure because now, in effect, the FEET body does not have a whole lot of say in all the transgressions that we've seen. Having said that, Quays had listed, a litany of issues that have happened over the past several months and maybe past year and a half. And that, in the end of the day, will be on the legacy of Farmajo from beginning to end. As bad as Qorqor and the rest are, when history is written, it will be under the Farmajo leadership that all of this has transpired. And that is an indictment on his record, the fact that now he's almost illegitimately staying over the 2 years that he's requested in front of Parliament that was categorically rejected across the board. So all in all, I worry what Quays said has a lot of truth, that Farmajo is not going to go willingly. He's not going to hold fair, credible elections. And the legitimacy of the outcomes of these elections will be really a serious concern for all Somalis across the board, because they have undermined all institutions in Somalia and have created this level of mistrust and sort of created an alliance of sorts that undermines our nationhood and the little bit of progress that we've had over the last couple of decades. So it's we all hold our breath. I don't think anybody can predict how things will land, but we'll see in terms of once the completion of the House of the People MPs is completed, once we actually see the election of the Gudumiya of Parliament, and get a sense of where things at. Also, the Deputy Speaker of the House, who gets that nod. Right now, there's a lot of conversation about Fahad Yassin, vying for the deputy. That happens. That's also an indictment of, and really, it's not even an indictment of the past, but a look forward to the future of what Somalia's parliament is going to be like in the next 4 or 5 years, and that is a worrisome trend. So the game is just maybe at 50% right now. The 50% to come is much more worrisome than what we've seen in the last 5 years.
Right. Quays, your reaction to the U.S. Department's, implementing its visa ban for the lack of completion of the elections that was to be on February. What's your reaction to the U.S.'s call to actually ban visas, and is that far enough?
I mean, U.S. has got a good point in here, and if you look at it, U.S. is, as well as the West, are really frustrated. They can see their investment is for so many years in Somalia going down on the drain, and that's not something they want to see. They want to see the democratic process that has been agreed by the Somali tribes to continue, and that to also, go on to the next level, whether it's one city to be held one man, one vote, or whether it's some kind of, another level to be gone from here. Now, what Farmajo is doing is he's reversing the whole process, and he's not even recognizing the federal system. If you look at it, he came in, he started, installing puppet presidents or leaders into some regions. If you look at Southwest, if you look at Galmudug, if you look at Hirshabelle, Banadir, he installed it by force. How many people have died in each election that has taken place in these regions? We know the record. We have the information. We don't have to explain it in here. So they have been watching closely. What they really wanted, if you listen to them or if you speak to them, is they wanted the time of Farmajo to end, because every time they try to confront or have a discussion, every educated conversation with him, he gets this card out of the pocket and say, oh, Somali sovereignty and this and that, and we're going to the UN and so on, which is total blackmailing, as well as he's blackmailing the Somali community by saying, oh, I'll rather stay 2 years extension, or I'll bring, a lot of his spies into the parliament. What do you really think these spies are going to do when they join the parliament? They only causing problems. So United Nations and the US and the West and European Union, everybody is frustrated. So when they are installing restrictions, They have no another option. But this is a signal, is a signal of what is about to come. If you heard them, they said after March, all the funding that they give to Somali community will stop. That means the next step that they could take is to really say Somalia should go back into a temporary state. It's no longer a legitimate government. They cannot rule themselves out. They cannot be a government. They cannot be a solid partner that can be relied on. And who put us in that category, who put us in that position is Mr. Farmacho. Now, listen to this. For the last few weeks, we have problems happening day and night in Mogadishu. If those problems continue by Al-Shabaab, where do you think Farmacho is going to go?
Guys, let me ask you about that, actually. That's one of the things that was prevalent last week with the resurgence of Al-Shabaab and other crimes destabilizing certain regions. But predominantly in Mogadishu, for example, we haven't had Al-Shabaab have such a brazen attacks on or conducting brazen attacks on police stations for all places and military bases. What is that foreshadowing? What is that telling us and how is that possible after so many years of having such attacks in Mogadishu?
Well, this is a result of a government that has really done nothing but to kind of separate the Somali people that has only been there to cause destruction. If you remember, the government before this one has taken a number of real solid war against those terrorist organizations. As far as they have gone into Jubaland, they have driven the terrorist organizations out of anywhere close to Mogadishu. Now we are talking about 5 years later, we're talking about police stations in Mogadishu, night attacks, continuous attacks, a big, police cars is being taken. We're not talking about AK-47 or a little pistol. We're talking about cars being driven from the police stations, taken by the terrorists, not even gone far from Mogadishu. And nobody is following them. Nobody is talking about them. No, there's literally no contingency plan. What that tells you is the government has failed. If you remember when Fahad Yassin has gone into Beledweyne to be elected, the explosion that has happened. These things are kind of, a lot of people are saying they are linked. The government, are working with Al-Shabaab, especially through Fahad. There's some kind of, coordination happening under the carpet. We don't have the evidences to back this up. But when you look at the signs, how can Al-Shabaab come into the center of Mogadishu, attack police station, kill everybody, take cars, and nobody is going to go after them? That's not just a logic.
Right. Hodan, your reaction to the instability in Mogadishu and other places. We know even, the peaceful Puntland had its president targeted recently. It seems like whatever little peace there was in Somalia is going on the sideway. What does that say about Somalia's apparatus and leadership in terms of dealing with security and the importance that has not just for Somalis, but for the international community that spend it and a lot of efforts in having what we had before?
Well, I think we all kind of see what's happening in Mogadishu and across the country and Shabaab gaining footage as part and parcel of a failed leadership, but also maybe a collaborative sort of effort between the government and Shabaab. Those have yet to be sort of, openly substantiated, but there are reports that indicate those that is the case. But, starting from the beginning, Farmajo came and deployed, valuable resources, military resources to get rid of his opposition as he deemed opposition, whether it's Gedo, whether it's opposition in Mogadishu, or whether it's destabilizing Puntland. That continues to be the game and the strategy. Shabaab was never the target for this government. We know what's happened in 2019 with the bombing of Mogadishu municipality that has killed the mayor and 9 others. no one has been held accountable for that, to my knowledge. We've had October 14th happen. I mean, the atrocities that Shabaab has committed in the last 5 years are beyond the realm of what Somalis could have expected from their government. And again, it's sort of a distracted government. It's a government that is working towards making sure it solidifies a grip across the country and rule by what do you call it, and the metal fist, as Farmajo has said in the past. So, but with all of that, I think now the international community, mainly the US, is realizing that its investment over the last how many years in Somalia is sort of headed in the wrong direction. And from a regional perspective, we are looking at Somalia as a single entity. But if you look at it at a regional lens, the US really has, Somalia is the last standing space that they can actually intervene and remain relevant. We see what's happened in Ethiopia in the Tigray War. We see what's happening in Sudan. We see other parts that really that are stepping in, the middle powers like Qatar and Turkey, and then China at the back and Russia at the back. And now we've got the Ukraine war that's going on. So I think strategically the US is seeing Somalia as the only, the last spot that they can actually remain relevant so that they don't lose the region as a whole. But having said that, again, I mean, this election or selection, and it's not even a selection anymore. This is how badly things have turned out. It really is an appointment of sorts, but we look to see how this ends. And if it ends with the same actors coming back into the play, clearly it's an indication for a really volatile region that is, kind of moving towards an autocratic, authoritarian rule across the board.
Appreciate that, both of you for joining us today and diving in and explaining some of these issues that are pregnant for Somalis and that actually, were going on specifically last week. Hodan Ali and Quays Ibry, I thank you for joining us. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.